I absolutely love the Mission Impossible movies. Well, most of them. One thing I really like is how their tech, their spy gadgets, as far-fetched as they are, they do their best to ground them in reality. Take Mission Impossible 3 for example. They have this voice-altering tech that Ethan has to wear to speak like Davian, so Ethan captures him and forces him to read this poem. The pleasure of Sean's company is what I most enjoy.
He put a tack on Miss Yancey's chair, called him a horrible boy.
As it happens, they crafted this poem for the movie, and it contains every phoneme on the English language. So the idea is that a computer can use all those sounds to perfectly simulate a person's voice. I love that they did it this way, and it's pretty much an Easter egg. They don't explain this in the movie, so pretty much 99% of the people who watch it probably have no idea. They just did this because it's cool, and to make the scene a little more realistic. And that's just one example. They do this all the time in every movie. So in this video I want to explore one of my favorite scenes in the franchise. The hallway illusion in the Kremlin infiltration scene on Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. So the scene goes like this. Ethan and Benji have to cross a door in a hallway where some files they need to steal are stored, but there's a guard at the end of the hallway. As it happens, Benji has this directional sound device he can use to lure the guard, so they could easily use this to lure the guard and knock him out. So what do? Instead of knocking out the guard, they lure him away for a few seconds so they can install a screen in the middle of the hallway. A screen that perfectly displays the view behind it so they can move across the door to the archives without anyone noticing it. So why do they do it this way instead of disabling the guard? Because it's fucking awesome, that's why. Okay, so you wanna test their tech and see how realistic it actually is. Now of course I can't build the thing for real, that would take millions of dollars provided it's even possible to do, and I don't have millions of dollars to test this. So I'll do what I can instead and recreate the tech in a game engine. Yeah, it's very convincing, scientific methodology, I know. Okay, so first we have this hallway over here. So I've made a little recreation of the hallway. Here's the model in Blender. It's nothing special, I tried to keep it as simple as possible, but still capture the ambience of the movie. And here's the hallway in Unreal Engine. I cheated a little bit. This is not a model, this is just a plane. But from all the way back here, the statue looks pretty good, I think. So the agents enter the hallway, Benji lures the guard away, and deploys the screen. So this is what my projection screen looks like. In the movie they have these supports at the sides. I had to put mine in the center like this. I'll explain the reason for this later. And last we have this camera over here that is used to capture the hallway, so the image can be displayed over here. So both in the movie and in my simulation, this illusion basically works in two steps. Let's start with step 1, which is the capture. The first part is simple, we just turn on this camera over here, capture the image of the hallway, and display the results here in the screen. In Unreal, the way we do this is with a scene capture component, which is over here, looking this way. And this is basically a camera, but this records the game and stores the recording in a render target, which is over here. This is my render target, right? And basically saves the image of the screen that was recorded. And then we can use this in a material, and we put this material over here in the screen, and basically the screen shows exactly what that camera captures, right? So let me show you what this looks like. Okay, so here's my screen, and as soon as I turn it on, it displays the captured image over here. But this doesn't do anything, right? The image doesn't move, it's like a big poster in the middle of the hallway, so it doesn't fool anyone. That's why we have this camera here, and some tracking software that finds where the guard is, finds his face, and uses that to move the camera. So basically they copy the position of the guard's face in horizontal or vertical directions, and they put the same position in the camera here. So let's do this next. So in my case, instead of the guard, I have this viewport camera. So I'll just copy whatever I do in this camera over here and copy the positions over to the camera over there. Okay, so now we've done this, what do we get? Whatever this is. Yeah, it doesn't look much better. We're just copying the position of the guard into the camera, so you can capture it from different locations, but the perspective still doesn't work. But this is still the first step, right? Now we get to the second step, which is taking this image and warping it, stretching it, moving it so that everything matches in the corners and in the perspective, right? Okay, so I'm here on the left, and notice that when I move to the right, the image is gonna move as well, but it's gonna move left faster than my own point of view. Right? They both move in the same direction but at different speeds. And same thing on this up and down. So what I have to do next is basically mess with the UVs of this material so that I can align this corner here of the carpet with this corner and this corner with this corner, and also so that the scale is correct, so that when I move left and right, the rate of movements is exactly the same, so it doesn't get like dissynced. And the same thing for the up and down movement. And obviously we don't know how this works in the movie, but it has to be the same thing, right? Because with just a camera we can't have this effect. So Benji has this little tablet that probably does all this processing and does all of this image warping to get the final effect that they need, right? So basically I've changed this material over here and added some parameters to change the scale and to shift the UVs up and down. Now the material is a little bit complex, so if you guys want, let me know in the comments and I'll explain exactly how it works. But I'll just show you how this works over here. Now this is like the basic state. As you can see, when I move left and right, we've got some tiling over here and the whole image moves as normal. But then if I change this scale here, I can change the scale of the UVs. So now it kind of moves with the carpets down there, and I can just tweak this to get the size that I want. And if I need to, I can change this to shift left and right. Same thing with the scale Y here. And basically it's just, this took like 15 minutes of tweaking for me. And in the end I got something like this, right? And you can see that this is already looking a lot better. The image moves with the screen. Then I have this styling over here. And there's not much I can do about this because this is like the limits of the camera, right? The camera cannot see beyond this point. So the only way that I can improve this is to take this whole image and scale it up, so that basically makes the image bigger and makes this side over here not show up anymore, be like outside the image over here. So this is what this param scale does. So I can increase this until I get a size that I want. And then I did a bunch more tweaking to change these values and to mess with the FOVs. Like if I change the field of view of my capture camera, I can change how close or how far the end of the hallway looks, right? So this is just a lot of tweaking to make this look as less distorted as possible and the closest that I can to the real image, right? And if I hide this, I can see the real image behind over there, right? But there are limitations, right? Because the camera can't see right over here in this edge. There's a limit to where the camera can see. And even if the camera could see all the way here, like if this camera was like a 360 degrees field view camera, I still couldn't use this because we're gonna have the two IMF agents over here, right? And the camera can't capture them. So there's like a blind spot here that pretty much has to be over here. Okay, so this is the current state of the screen, and it's looking better, right? But there are still a few issues, and one of these issues is one of the things that would be almost impossible to fix in real life, and it's that when you look at a surface, the way that that surface looks depends on the direction that you're looking at it, right? It's not like it's gonna look the same if I look from over here and from over here, or from close or from far away, because the way the light bounces and reflects off surfaces, right? Which means when I'm looking at that point over there of the carpet, the way that the camera is going to look at that same point is going to be different, because that camera is looking more or less straight down and I'm looking at an angle, and the lighting in that region is going to be different and all of those things, right? So from here, this is all a continuous image, but if I turn on my projector, it's not going to look the same, right? And there's really no way to fix this, because there's no way the software can figure out what that surface should look like from my point of view. So this is, I think, one of the biggest issues with this whole idea, right? And one way that I figured that I could make this a little better was using some opacity. So what I did was I took a mask and I made the edges up, down, left and right to be transparent. So if we look at the difference here, now the edges are transparent, right? And they smoothly transition into the other side. which makes that hard edge like a lot less visible, but there's still like a problem, right? So first, if I'm looking from way over here, I can still see the bottom of the support over there. And this is the reason that I made the supports back here in the center, because if they were on the sides or on the bottom, you'd be able to see them when I add this transparency, right? You can also make this transparent area a little smaller, but you know, the smaller it is, the more visible the hard edge is. And then these colors, like even if the edge is smooth, now we can see that the color here is different in this area here. The size of this door is going to be different because it's going to cut off a little part of it. So basically the only way that this works is if the guard is like nearsighted and is not wearing glasses, and he doesn't work here very often, he's not familiar with this area, so he doesn't know like the size of this door by heart, and maybe he's a little drunk. But as far as how the effect works, it's actually looking pretty similar to the movie. It looks pretty good, I think. And then of course we have that moment when two guards enter the scene, and then the tracking software can't decide which guard to track. And then we get something that looks a little bit like this. I'm just tracking my position and a position a little bit to the right and down. Yeah, this is really cool, man. This looks exactly like the movie. Basically the camera is just switching between tracking me and tracking the other guard that is to my right. And this actually brings me to another problem with this technology in the real world, and it's the fact that people have two eyes. So this thing that's happening right now, this would happen with a person, right? Of course, the tracking software wouldn't keep switching from my left to my right eye. It wouldn't work like that. It would just find a middle point between the eyes, use that as a point of reference. But that means this screen over here would be 2D, right? There would be, if there are any objects over here, they would look flat, which could and could not be an issue, depending on how far the guard is, I suppose. So yeah, I'd say maybe I would give this a pass. Maybe this would work if the guard was like pretty far away, right? Oh yeah, and then we have that scene when Benji almost screws everything up and puts his face right in front of the camera. Let's see how it looks in here in the simulation. Yeah, honestly, not bad. Okay, so can we reach any conclusions from this little experiment? I would simply say that the idea is really clever, the math works, such an effect is clearly possible to create, in theory, but because of some issues with tone mapping, stereo vision, field of view, and also limitations with technology like a flexible, lightweight, high definition screen like this doesn't exist. At least it doesn't exist yet. And even if it did, the cost of such a device would be such that really would make no sense to create something like this, when you can just punch the guard in the face. But I am really happy they didn't go that route.
Around the third or fourth script that we were shooting, there was a scene where I was supposed to sneak up behind somebody, a villain in this case, and hit him on the head with the butt of it to render him unconscious. I said to the director, this is archaic, to pull a gun and hit a guy on the head from behind. And I avoided what I consider physical violence, cracking people on the head. You know, it was a merciful way of knocking out an enemy.
Of course, you're being violent, you realize. You're only splitting hairs to make yourself feel
but
good.
you get some kind of sense of progress, some sense of sophistication, at least, you know. So you're not running around punching people and, you know, chasing and running and hitting and jumping and all of that. They call it action. I don't mind action if it is organic and vital to the script, if it makes some interesting or meaningful statement. But as a means of relating to people, as a means of solving problems, no.